Am I audible? Any issue? Audible? Okay, good afternoon students. Welcome to Raj Malhotra IAS Academy. In today's current affairs session, we will be discussing two topics. One is about Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill 2021. Okay, we will discuss this in detail. And second is we will discuss about various types of orbits. Because of different launches, this topic makes for prelims 2022, this is a very important topic. So I will discuss different types of orbits. Okay, so first for the new students, we have UPSC open mock test for all students. One was conducted on April 17th, test second will be on 24th, third will be on 1st May 2022. All are open to all students, free for all students. Fine, you can come and give offline test, you can give it online test. You will get the links for this test series in description. Okay, you will get the link for this series in description. Fine, now we will start our first topic. This is very important topic. Amendment in the wildlife protection amendment bill 2021. So these amendments will be part of your Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Why we are changing? Why government is amending this bill? Why government is amending this act? In simple terms, we can say to make it the wildlife protection or conservation in line with sites. What is sites? I will discuss in detail. So government want to make national laws about protection of wildlife in line with sites. So what are the changes? What are the amendments done in this bill? Okay, so I will discuss in detail about these things. Sites. What is sites? Sites is convention on international trade in endangered specimen, either plants or animals, specially endangered wildlife specimen. Okay, there are three categories, or you can say three appendices in sites. Three appendices which manages, or you can say which have rules for the import and export of, especially for the endangered specimen, or you can say endangered species. Okay, there are total 124 members. Total 124 members of this site treaty. Okay, and this is legally binding. This treaty is legally binding, but remember, it will not replace the national laws. It will not replace the national laws. ये legally binding तो है, but it will not replace the national laws. So what are the three kind of species, or you can say three appendices? Classify, how we classify these species. In first, you will have endangered species. You will have endangered species, around 1200 species are there, which are threatened to be endangered, which are threatened to be extinct, For example, Asiatic lion. You know Asiatic lion? Gir lions. Okay, tigers. These are the species which are near or threatened to be extincted. Getting my point? These around 1200 species are there in this first schedule. Second is around 20. In second you have, in second schedule or appendices, you have around 21,000 species. These species are not so endangered, but in near future they may be threatened to extinct. In near future, abhi nahi hai, but to control, if the trade, import and export will go on, they may be on the verge of extinction or threat to be extincted. Okay. In first case, in first schedule, these species, the trade, export and import, the permission should be taken by managing authority of importing and exporting country. But in second, without the export and import can be done without the permission. Any कोई permission नहीं चाहिए इसके लिए. Got this or not? And third appendices is your third schedule is your of around 170 species. These species are the conservation, or you can say the regulations in the trade of these species are requested by member countries to the other member countries. For example, a country is saying to or asking other member countries to have protection in trade, export and import of some species. These are in okay, these are in schedule 3, you can say. So Indian government want to change national laws, or you can say act in line with CITES. CITES has the main, you can say, characteristic or main points of CITES is every member country should have its own managing and scientific authority which will manage the trade, It should have a law to protect the endangered species, and should have penalties for any violation in this. Should have penalties in violation with any. Most of countries, जो ज़्यादातर countries है, does not follow these rules or these criterias. Fine. Indian government want to follow this, so we are making our Wildlife Protection Act in line with our CITES commitments. Okay, CITES की जो commitment है उसी के according we are making our national laws. Fine. So what will be the changes in your Protection Act, Wildlife Protection Act 1972? There will be only 4 schedules. As compared to 6 schedules earlier. पहले कितने थे? 6 schedules. What are these schedules? These are the schedules which have list of animals which have variable protection. For example, the animals of schedule 1 earlier, animals of schedule 1 and schedule 2, especially part 2 of schedule 2 are endangered animals. There will be no permission for hunting of these animals. Getting my point? For example, schedule 3 and schedule 4 will have your big game and small game animals which can be hunted with the permission from Chief Warden of Wildlife Sanctuary. वो hunt किए जा सकते हैं with the permission of Chief Warden of Wildlife Sanctuary. Getting my point? Schedule 5, vermin animals. What do you mean by vermin? These are small animals, or these are common animals like crow, like bats. Especially few of these are carriers of some human diseases. They can be hunted without any permission. And schedule 6 was about protection of plants species, especially endemic species. Now there will be only 4 schedules, and there will be no defined vermin species. There will be no defined vermin species in new, or you can say after these new amendments. Getting my point? Vermin species hongi hi nahi. Everything will be in schedule 1 and 2, which 2 schedules will be for the protection of, remember, 2 schedules will be for the protection of wildlife animals according to their protection level, schedule 1 and schedule 2. Other thing is schedule 3 will be for the species of sites. जो sites में species है ना, उनके लिए you will have schedule 3 and schedule for the endemic plant species. Now they have different criteria, different schedules for protection of wildlife sanctuary, or you can say trade in wildlife sanctuary. Fine. Another change will be there will be a managing and scientific authority which will look after the export and import of your wildlife species. Getting my point? ये क्या होगा? Authorities set की जाएंगी at state level. State will be the, you can say, will appoint these authorities, and which will give the permission in export and imports of especially the species under CITES agreement. Getting my point? ये species का आपका क्या होगा? They will get permission from managing and scientific authority. Got this or not? Another important change is in the export and import of alien species or exotic species. You will ask, what are these species? For example, eucalyptus. Safeda देखा सबने? Eucalyptus is a species which have come, or you can say is a native of Australia. India की native नहीं है. It has been introduced in past from Australia. Why the introduction of these species is dangerous for native vegetation, or you can say native organisms, domestic organisms? Why? Because the alien species or exotic species do not have any competition there. For example, eucalyptus is grown in Australian semi-arid conditions. Eucalyptus have low, you can say, deep roots. Now it has been introduced in India. There is no predator of eucalyptus, no competitor of eucalyptus in India. So the number of, you can say, eucalyptus will increase day by day. Why? कोई competitor तो है ही नहीं. They have survival advantage over native species. So if somebody want to trade in exotic species, then they have to take permission from concerned authority, and the concerned authority will be managing, or you can say scientific authority appointed by state. Got this or not? Any issues? Hanji? Fine? Chaliye. And another thing is there will be increase in penalties. Generalized violation will lead to the penalties of 1 lakh rupees. पहले कितनी थी? It was 25,000. Now it's 1 lakh. So increase in penalties for any violation in trade. Fine? Chaliye. Next topic we are going to discuss is about different kind of orbits. So you should have an idea when you are reading about, for example, last launch of PSLV, where it was launched. So you will get some terms like geosynchronous orbit, geostationary orbit, low Earth orbit, which kind of satellites are launched in these orbits, why these are launched in particularly on those or in those orbits only. We will discuss these things in detail. Okay, so different kind of orbits. geostationary and geosynchronous orbit we will discuss in detail. By name, you can have an idea what is this. Geosynchronous. Geo means synchronized with Earth. What is synchronization? It takes same time that Earth takes to rotate on its axis, means it takes around 24 hours to revolve around the surface of the Earth. Okay, any satellite launched in geosynchronous orbit will take around 24 hours. I will discuss this in detail. Then low Earth orbit, middle Earth orbit, okay, polar orbits and sun synchronous orbits are low Earth orbits only, but you get these terms while you study a newspaper or when you read a newspaper, studies any kind of current affair notes, you will get these sun synchronous, these terms. Then transfer orbits, that is geostationary GTO. You will find after a launch there is this term is written, the satellite was launched in GTO orbit. What is this GTO orbit? We will discuss. And Lagrange point, these are not orbits. Lagrange points are not orbit. These are the points between, you can say, sun and Earth, where the gravitational force of both these celestial bodies are similar, are in balance, you can say, not similar, sorry, are in balance. For example, there are few points around the Earth where the gravitational force of sun and Earth are in balance. So if you put any satellite or anything to observe the celestial body, it will remain there because these points have gravitational balance of both Earth and sun. Okay, they are in balance. They will not be pulled towards Earth or they will not be pulled towards sun, because the gravitational force at these points is in balance. So I will discuss these things in detail. Okay, so on the basis of height from the surface of the Earth, on the basis of height from the surface of the Earth, we divide the orbits into three kind of orbits. Is it visible? High Earth orbit, you will write high Earth orbit. These are the orbits which have height more than or equal to 35,786 kilometer, 784 kilometer from the surface of the Earth. Your geostationary and geosynchronous orbits are example of high Earth orbit. Then you have middle Earth orbits. Middle Earth orbits are the orbits which have height from the surface of Earth between 2000 to 35,784 kilometer. Low Earth orbit, orbits having height of 160 kilometer to 2000 kilometer. Okay, remember, most of the communication satellites are launched in high Earth orbit, geostationary and geosynchronous orbits. Middle Earth orbits, you can say, are the orbits where your navigational satellites are launched. Most of the navigational satellites are launched. Earth observatory satellites are launched. Navigational satellite, for example, satellite for your GPS. Indian navigational satellites are launched in high Earth orbit, were launched in high Earth orbit. India के high Earth orbit में, but GPS is global positioning system, the navigational system of your USA. USA का navigational system है. So USA's navigational system satellites are launched in medium Earth orbit. Similarly, Galileo is your, you can say, navigational satellites of your navigational system of European Space Agency और European Union, उनका नेविगेशनल क्या है आपका सिस्टम है। जैसे हमारा IRNSS है, हमारा जो नेविगेशन सिस्टम है is launched in high earth orbit. I will talk in detail about those. Okay, low earth orbit. In low earth orbit, Earth observatory satellites are launched. EOS. Last launch by Isro was a Earth observatory satellite, and Earth observatory satellites are launched in low Earth orbit. Your radar technology or remote sensing satellites are launched in what? Low Earth orbits, because I will discuss these in detail. Fine. So first we will discuss about geosynchronous and geostationary orbit. This was height of the orbit. Other two factors which define a character of orbit are eccentricity. How elliptical your path is. Elliptical, you know, oval shaped. If it is more oval shaped, then it is called elliptical. It may be circular or it can be highly elliptical. एक छोटा सा I will give you simple example. Most of the countries in equatorial region or in tropics launches their satellite in near circular orbit, and most of the countries like Russia, Scandinavian countries launches their satellites in highly elliptical orbit. Reason I will tell you. Okay, and another thing is how your orbit of satellite is inclined with equator. Orbit of equator, you can say, this is known as orbital inclination. कितने का एंगल है इक्वेटर के साथ, वो आपका क्या होगा, it will be your orbital inclination. These are important characteristic of your any orbit. कोई भी orbit है, any orbit, characteristic of any orbit. Okay, first geostationary or you can say geosynchronous, both will be discussed. Geostationary is example of your geosynchronous orbit only. Satellite in a geostationary orbit or geosynchronous orbit will take 24 hours to revolve around sun, same time taken by your earth to rotate on its axis. उतना ही time लेगी. Getting it or not? So what will happen? For example, this, and it is, the height is around 35,784 kilometer. So satellite, for example, this is satellite. Now satellite will take same time. It was launched over India. So Earth take 24 hours. This takes 24 hours. This satellite will be over the India for 24 hours. So it is providing signals for 24 hours, whole day providing signal over India. And why you require continuous signal, or in which technology you require, for what purpose you require 24-hour signals? Communication satellites. Getting my point? Communication satellites, you need continuously exchange, or you can say continuously the satellite should be over particular region. That's why most of the communication satellites are launched in your geostationary or geosynchronous orbit. Fine. Then what is difference between geostationary and geosynchronous? Geostationary is exactly over equator. It doesn't move northward or southward of equator. There is, the angle of inclination is 0. So you will find a person on surface will find the satellite exactly at same point. Geostationary satellite will be exactly at same point for the observer on the surface of the earth for 24 hours, because it is not moving northward or southward. It is not moving northward or southward. But in case of geosynchronous, can you see this? In case of geosynchronous, what will happen? The time taken by satellite in its orbit will be, the time taken will be 24 hours, but the orbit will be at an angle, at inclination, at an angle with your equator. Angle of inclination will be more than 0. It will be around 30 degree, 20 degree. So it's not rotating east to west only, it is moving northward of equator, then coming to equator, then moving southward of equator. That's why if an observer observes, listen carefully, if an observer observes a satellite in geosynchronous orbit, he will find satellite is moving northward, coming to equator, then southward, then coming to equator. So the difference, only difference in geosynchronous and geostationary satellite is angle of inclination. Angle of inclination is more for geosynchronous satellite, and they cover more area because they are moving northward and southward. They cover more area as compared to geostationary satellite. So geosynchronous and geostationary satellite take 24 hours to complete a revolution around the earth, but the difference is angle of inclination, and geosynchronous covers more area. Got this or not? Then medium earth orbit. Medium earth orbit, this is, wait a minute, medium earth orbit. For example, this is example of your Galileo and GPS satellite constellations. GPS, 24 satellites for GPS, 24 satellite for Galileo. These satellites are launched around 20,200 kilometer above the surface. So medium earth satellites, or you can say orbits, are mainly used for navigational satellite. किसके लिए use होते हैं? They are used for navigational satellite. Example of this is GPS and Galileo. Fine. Then low earth orbit. By name you can understand the low earth orbit. Less than 2000 meter. Here it's written less than 1000 meter. This is these figures can vary from different agencies. For example, NASA, this is from NASA's site, this is 1000. Normally for you student, you should know this is less than 2000 kilometer, but most of the satellite of low earth orbits are under 1000 kilometer. So they are just 1000 kilometer above the surface of the earth, so they will take less time. Usually on average, a satellite launch in low earth orbit takes 90 minutes to revolve. Takes 90 minutes to revolve. So there will be around 17 to 18 revolution around the surface of the earth. 17 to 18. So it can cover, listen, now this is low earth orbit and earth is rotating below this orbit. Earth is rotating on its axis, so it can cover whole of the earth. Why? It is revolving, or it is taking only 90 minutes to revolve or complete one revolution. So 17 revolution per day, 17 to 18 revolution per day. So what will happen? 17 to 18. So it can cover whole earth surface within a day or two. So when you require satellite for Earth observation, then you will launch the satellite in low Earth orbit. Like this, it will cover the, I will show the slide which shows how the remote sensing satellite or Earth observatory satellite covers whole surface of the Earth. Okay. Another example of low Earth orbit is your polar orbits. Usually your low Earth orbits are polar orbits, means it will revolve around poles, not exactly over poles but revolve around poles. थोड़ा सा angle होगा, there will be a little bit of, you can say, angle with the axis of rotation, but it will go around poles and it is launched in low Earth orbit. A variation of this is sun synchronous orbit. Sun synchronous orbit. What do you mean by sun synchronous? With the name you can suggest sun synchronous, means synchronized with sun. For example, you have Earth observatory satellite in your polar orbit. So you want to cover, for example, I am standing in Chandigarh. You want to observe Chandigarh at 8 o'clock morning every day. 8 o'clock morning every day. Then this satellite should pass over Chandigarh at 8 o'clock every day. Means the sunlight will be same, or the position of sun, satellite and your area will be synchronized. Sun, satellite, your area of observation will be synchronized. So you will take your data every day at the same time. This is how sun synchronous orbit works, and ISRO's last satellite was launched in sun synchronous orbit. That satellite EOS 4 was in sun synchronous orbit and it was a remote sensing Earth observatory satellite. Got this or not? This is how. For example, it took 17 or 18. So it will take photographs. For example, in remote sensing, 17 or 18 times and 17 or 18 different areas. Next day, another areas. Next day, another areas. So by this, it can cover whole surface of the Earth. And when you have to take vegetation data, you have to take data about the topography, means mountains, plains, plateaus, then you will take data from Earth observatory satellite which are launched in sun synchronous and polar orbits, which are examples of low Earth orbits. GTO. This is very interesting and most of the students do not know about this orbit, does not know about this orbit. How? GTO, Geosynchronous Transfer Orbit. What is this? For example, you have to launch a satellite in geosynchronous or geostationary orbit at 35,784 kilometers. If you launch directly in this orbit, you require high amount of energy. Why? Because you are directly launching the satellite at the height of 35,784 kilometers. So how the scientist or how ISRO launches a satellite in geostationary orbit? First, it will launch the satellite in a geotransfer orbit. For example, can you see this yellow line? Can you see this yellow line? They will launch the satellite in this elliptical orbit. They will launch this satellite in this elliptical orbit. And what will happen when this satellite, because they have to just push it here, इतना ही push करना है, and it will move by itself in this orbit, but it will follow same orbit, but you have to launch in this orbit. What will happen? The engines, they will start engines pre-decided. It was pre-decided. They will start some kind of engines or motors, you can say, which will launch the satellite in its original orbit or required orbit. So you have just launched it here only. इतना सा फ्यूल लगा, it by itself or by its path, it has moved to this area. Now here you will start engines or motors which will shift it to new orbit. By this we are saving fuel, by this we are cutting the cost. Getting my point or not? This is why every geosynchronous or geostationary satellite is launched in GTO first, and then it is moved to the geosynchronous or geostationary, geostationary orbit. Got this or not? Last is your Lagrange points. These are the points where the gravitational force of Earth and Sun is in balance. So you have 5 Lagrange point. Why you should learn these and why should you remember this? L1, L2, L3 in straight line with your position of Sun and Earth. L4 and L5 are around 60 degree, make 60 degree angle. So what are the things you should remember in this? Lagrange points में क्या क्या याद रखना है? First thing is your Lagrange point L1, L2, L3 are unstable. Means if you want to put a satellite or any space or any telescope at these points, you have to provide some kind of energy to make them stable there, क्योंकि ये point बहुत ज़्यादा unstable है. For example, unstable, if you put a marble on a watermelon, if you put a marble on a watermelon, तरबूज, okay, fine. So क्या होगा कि it will move either side, it is unstable, fine. Now remember, these 3 points are unstable. L2, L4 and L5 are stable. L4 and L5 are stable, fine. So if somebody asks you which are unstable points, Lagrange point L1, L2 and L3, and L4 and L5 are stable. ये याद रखना. Second thing is ISRO's Aditya L1 mission will be launched on L1 point and James Webb telescope was launched in L2 point. ये दोनों चीजें आपको याद रखनी है. You have to learn these two things. Aditya L1 mission will be launched in L1 Lagrange point, and in L2 Lagrange point your James Webb telescope was launched to study the celestial bodies. Got this or not? Okay, this was about the various orbits and Lagrange points. Okay, so next Snigdha ma'am will be taking your Thursday's IR current affairs. Okay, the PDF, you will get this PDF in Telegram, on Telegram channel. आज ही डल जाएगी. Okay, fine, thank you.